Well, good evening, folks. Thanks for joining me. I'm on holiday this week, but I'm lucky to be able to give you a broadcast from my favourite little river. When Jesus tells his audience that he's the bread of life, it causes them to grumble. They don't quite understand it. When the Hebrews travelled through the wilderness, God gave them bread from heaven and he gave them flesh. And that's what they needed to complete the journey to get them across the wilderness to the promised land. And Jesus says, no, I'm that bread that came down from heaven. I am the true bread. And suggests that they need to eat him or to consume him. You'll need to consume me if you want life. And they understand that it's a saying. They say, this is a hard saying. They understand it's something of a parable or something like that. So some of them go away because they don't really like what is said and they don't want to have to think about it. So here we go. I am the bread of life. Well, us humans, we like rituals. We like a bit of pageantry, we like a bit of ceremony. And I'm going to outline 3 rituals that might help. We have a ritual called the Eucharist where we receive him symbolically. Some evangelicals receive him by like a personal decision. Now, I'm not making this up. Today there are Pentecostals who receive him by being prayed for, and they fall down for a while. And I'm not making that up, that's genuine. Now, I don't want to sound critical of any of them because rituals can have an impact on us. They can be powerful, and no nation knows that better than Britain. We do pageantry better than anybody else. But bear in mind that even Jesus, preaching amazing sermons, great teaching and performing miracles, he didn't get 100% success. He didn't convince everybody. He had a certain number of people who believed and quite a number who turned against him. So he knows all about this, that you do your best to communicate a message. You hope that what you say goes in, but it doesn't always, as it were, work. So let's turn to John for some help, the great Apostle John. A ritual provides us with an opportunity. It can prove to be a good expression of what we desire. So we might ask the question, if Jesus is the bread of life, how can I be sure I've consumed him? And that's a good question. And John the Apostle comes to our rescue by giving some simple tests. So he says, I want you to be certain that you have eternal life. Wow. Not bad. Firstly, I want you to realize, he says, that step 1 is to recognize that Jesus is God, fully God. That means he's in command. That means he's the boss. That means you do as he says. It means there's no alternative because there's only room for one God. It's him, no one else, no other. And his words, that's it. There is no other authority. So we can't pick and choose who we obey. And John says the second test is very similar. Because if you think he's God, you will obey him. His instructions become your guide for life. His instructions become our commands. So he's the one we turn to and we follow him. We obey him. Now that's useful. So these are things we can ask ourselves, questions. And John says, I want you to know that you have eternal life. And I want you to test yourself with these questions. Number 3 is very good as well. He says, when you go to church, you've got to like each other. You've got to get on. That's really good. You can't be a shepherd if you don't like the flock. You can't be a shepherd of God's people if you don't like God's people. So you've got to like the Christians. You've got to like the people in church. And there's not really a choice in that one. It's kind of compulsory, and it can be a stretch sometimes, but it's perfectly doable. It's not impossible. And after all, he does want to give us help. So God is a God who offers us the help we need. So number 3 is you've got to like the other people in church. And he also says We don't let the world tell us how to behave. Worldly morality has always been fluid. It's always been changing. Worldly morality has always been slippery. But we trust our shepherd because he knows best. We don't take our values from the shifting sands of the world. We take our values from the master. We are not in love with the world. And lastly, we're not frightened to come before him and confess our bad attitudes. We can be open about our innermost thoughts. He loves us too much to allow us to stay the way we are. So I'm going to leave you with a lovely little saying. Confession brings progression. How's that? So John writes, I want you to be certain that you have eternal life. Perhaps he could say, I want you to be certain that you have consumed Jesus. And I'd like you to be certain too. So, have a nice night. It's good evening from me.